You're on, Michael.
Hello, I'm Michael Grossberg, founder and board member of the Libertarian Futures Society, launched in 1982 to sustain the Prometheus Awards for Best Pro-Freedom, SF, and Fantasy. And this is the 2020 Prometheus Award ceremony at the online North American Science Fiction Convention. Welcome. Do stick around immediately afterwards, for our panel discussion on visions of SF, liberty, human rights, the Prometheus Awards over 4 decades, from F. Paul Wilson and Robert Heinlein to today. The Prometheus Awards take their name from the ancient Greek myth about a titan who risked angering the gods by bringing fire to mankind. Quote, "The myth undergirding the civilization of the West," French philosopher Louis Rougier wrote in his 1969 book, The Genius of the West, "is the myth of Prometheus, the philanthropic hero who dared defy the will of Zeus by stealing fire from heaven and giving it to mortal men whom that jealous tyrant of the heaven and the earth had decided to destroy. The story expresses the spirit of revolt against the prohibition of jealous gods and embodies that love of action which incited Hercules to rid the earth of tyrants," end quote. Libertarian futurists recognize that art and culture can fire up the imagination about the limitless possibilities of liberty and justice for all. That's why the Prometheus Awards for 4 decades have recognized speculative fiction that dramatizes the perennial conflict between liberty and power, champions cooperation over coercion as the ethical path to peace, prosperity, and progress, and envisions a better world for all in which libertarian principles of non-aggression, self-ownership, voluntarism, and individual rights are respected. Over 4 decades, the LFS and the Prometheus have been recognized themselves with increasing attention and respect. For example, in June, a Quillette magazine article on the libertarian history of science fiction referenced our awards and tradition dating back to the late 1970s of giving winners a gold coin, quote, representing free trade and free minds. The article also explains why libertarian-themed science fiction remains a key part of modern science fiction. Here's a quote: "The soil of speculative fiction has the right nutrients for the flourishing of libertarian values. Unlike most ideologies that advocate forms of protectionism, Luddite restrictionism, and central planning, the libertarian outlook values choice, freedom, and market solutions." Another element in both SF and libertarianism certainly is a general openness to radical new ideas and an instinctive rejection of stale convention and custom, end quote. Now it's my great honor to introduce F. Paul Wilson, Grand Master of Horror and Prometheus Award Lifetime Achievement winner. Paul has written over 60 books spanning science fiction, horror, adventure, medical thrillers, and young adult, with over 8 million books in US print. Paul won the first Prometheus, presented by L. Neil Smith in 1979, to his SF mystery Wheels Within Wheels. Wilson has since won other Prometheuses for Healer, Sims, and An Enemy of the State. Paul will present the 2020 Prometheus Award for Best Novel.
So, that first Prometheus Award, I remember receiving a letter telling me my second novel, Wheels Within Wheels, had won the Prometheus Award. The internet was young back then and email wasn't a real thing, so it came by Pony Express. I remember thinking, what is the Prometheus Award, and who or what is the Libertarian Futurist Society? So nowadays, it's 4+ decades later, and everybody knows the Prometheus Award. But back then, it was the new kid on the block. The gold coins that went with the prize were nice, but the best thing for me was learning that there were kindred souls out there. For the most part, we write in isolation. I mean, we get feedback from our editor and reviewers, but before the web, if readers wanted to contact you, they had to sit down and write a letter, then mail it to the publisher, who then had to forward it to your agent, who then forwarded it to you. The few letters that reached you were often from long-term prisoners with lots of free time and looking for free books. But here it was, these like-minded people saying, We saw what you did and we get it, and we want to recognize you for it. I wasn't used to that. I remember stepping onto the Georgetown campus in the September of 1964 in the middle of the Johnson-Goldwater presidential race and immediately realizing that I was a political orphan. The word libertarian existed back then, and if I remember, it just meant someone who believed in free will. But it really wasn't in the political vocabulary. So I didn't know what I was. I just knew I wasn't like them, and them being everyone else I met. The free speech movement was sweeping campuses back then and demanding that students and professors be allowed to say whatever they damn well pleased. Mario Savio was sort of the figurehead of that, a very libertarian position. And now the anti-free speech movement is sweeping campuses, demanding that all students and professors adhere to the latest approved version of Newspeak. So clearly, we need the consciousness-raising presence of the Prometheus Award more than ever. So let's get to it. The 5 finalists for the 2020 Prometheus Award for Best Novel, in alphabetical order by author, are The Testaments by Margaret Atwood, Random House, Alliance Rising by C.J. Cherry and Jane S. Francher, Daw Books, Ruins Wake by Patrick Edwards, Titan Books, Luna, Moon Rising by Ian MacDonald, Tor Books, and Ode to Defiance by Mark Stiegler, LMBPN Publishing. And the Prometheus Best Novel winner is Alliance Rising by Cherry and Francher.
Okay, why isn't my picture going, guys? Hello?
Your picture was fine for a second. Turn it back on. Your picture's good. Go.
Oh, great. I can't see myself.
We're okay.
Oh, we're in trouble now. I'm Jane. This is CJ. She wanted me to go first. And I think that's because it's kind of my fault that this book happened in the first place. And so I said, no problem. And then I'm used to talking at conventions and making it up as I go along. But then we got a notice that we were supposed to write it out so they would have something to post online. And that's a little harder because I don't write speeches. So I started stressing, and instead of going to the blank screen and doing something with it, I brought up Spider Solitaire and found the only unsolvable problem that Microsoft ever made. I finished it, so now I have to talk. Let me start by just saying thank you very much to the Libertarian Futurist Society just for putting us on the ballot alongside so many other great books. That would have been cool enough to actually win has my diehard libertarian brother doing a virtual Snoopy dance. Yes, I grew up with a very libertarian brother, and I cannot say that it did not affect the way I feel about the universe in general. But we couldn't be happier. Any author hopes in the back of their mind to win some kind of award when they start doing this, to win one that acknowledges the successful incorporation of a powerful message like this. That's just about perfect. The other person we need to thank is Betsy Walheim at Daw Books. We couldn't have done it without her support and enthusiasm. She loves the Alliance Union universe in which it's set as much as we do. We've wanted to do an open collaboration for years. Daw gave us that chance, and thank you, Betsy, very much for believing in us and for your excellent input that helped us clarify the very complex, tangled elements of this story. And that sound, if you heard it, is our cat on his scratching post, the joys of home video.
Yes.
So why am I responsible? because before we ever met, I was a big fan of Carolyn's. And as much as I love her foreigner books, I'm really a fan of the Alliance Union universe. And over the years, I built up lots and lots of questions that I pestered her with. Once we started working together, she got pestered even more because I knew more about it and I knew there was a lot that hadn't been said. So when we got the chance to do an open collaboration, it really was my first choice. It deals with it's the earliest of the Alliance Union books, and it deals with a point in time when everything shifts from a corporate-owned power structure to a free trade power structure. And I'm actually going to let Carolyn talk a little more about that. I'm going to kind of truncate this. They can read it online. The merchanters, the alliance involved is the merchanters, and the merchanters are the key element of the free trade and freedom of living style, if you will, that's at the core of the book. There's a lot more that I wrote that will be online, and I'm just going to let Carolyn take over because it's really her universe, and she has just invited me in to play in it, and I couldn't be happier.
Well, when I was asked to reprise and catch up with a universe that began, I guess, back in the 80s, it was a little daunting. When I started out to write the books in the first place, I began with a star map, a real star map, the nearest stars to Earth, the stars closest to the sun, obviously. I started my map. I made my calculations with the aid of an Atari computer, you may imagine, and a lot of tractor feed paper. I worked out a route within the realm of possibility, but a lot of real astronomy has happened since then, and I was a little nervous. I mean, had anything been discovered that was just going to put the absolute kibosh on things that I had imagined? Well, I got to reading and researching, and no, it was actually even better. So I'm real happy to say that the places out there, Alpha and Venture and all of those, still remain viable when we decide to take advantage of them. And after a certain time, we decided that we should start laying down plot. We headed for our favorite pub, staked out our usual booth. The waiters know we're slightly different. And we began plotting and made a trip to Seattle, still plotting all the way back. We laid out our basic scenario based on things that have turned up in already published books, because of course we're now writing the beginning of everything that I'd laid down since.
Oh, I forgot to mention, I really wanted Captain James Roberts and Infinity's End's story. So I was willing to hold my breath to do this particular story to fill in the blanks. Go ahead.
Well,
fortunately, she was willing.
Yes, Captain James Robert, who figures in a folk song.
And in a lot of the books.
And in several of the books, yes. Was the must-have. So, of course, he's there, and so are a number of the merchanters of the era. And we began figuring out how to manage this collaboration that we were about to do. And we ended up with our own method. I was sort of responsible for Captain James Roberts, or JR as he calls himself. Jane was the one who suggested Ross, who we pretty well had to have.
You need somebody who doesn't know anything.
Yeah, Ross really doesn't know anything.
Has to have
And,
everything explained to them.
Yeah, but at any rate, we went from there, and it's sort of like we'd work and trade back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And the end result is, on any given paragraph of that book, neither one of us can figure out who wrote it. And the actual answer is we both did. And when we got to the merchanters, we had to develop the history there as well. They are descendants of the pusher ships that used to serve the stations, traveling for decades.
That again is something that is established. Can I interrupt for just a minute?
Yeah, sure, absolutely.
One of the things about this series is that it is establishing the details of things that are alluded to in a whole bunch of other books. And the exciting thing about this time is that it is when the merchanters, who are the core of free trade, come into their own. And that was one reason that I was so excited to do it, because the economy, the issues of freedom and everything else for the first time really do take center stage in one of the Alliance Union stories. And we didn't set out to, we had no notions of Prometheus Award in our heads when we started it. But it is, but I understand now exactly why, the book deserved to be addressed or considered for it, and we are really thankful. But it is an exciting time in the Alliance Union universe. Does that help?
That helps.
Okay.
Anyway, the Earth Company started everything. They sent out the original pusher ships, and they believe they own everything, and continue to own it centuries later. Meanwhile,
anybody who has done work for hire and resented it when they come up with something that makes a whole bunch of money for the parent company can understand the problems that arose with this eventually.
And eventually, of course, as the trail of stars visited and brought into this system suddenly includes Tau Ceti, which is a G-class star and has a planet. They, not only that, in our world, a life-bearing planet, that tossed the whole arrangement into limbo because they had a new source
Of food.
And of livestuffs and everything.
And the company store had competition.
And that didn't play well back on Earth, who took probably, 6-point-something other years to get the information to do about it. And that didn't work real well either. So eventually, division happened. The whole thing, I see a notice that we could lose our internet connection, so perhaps I had better haste. This is what eventually brought the group of merchanters to Alpha, the first of all stations, and the only station still under EC Earth Company control, to deliver a message to the local merchanters. They wanted them to join them.
That there were options to the...
There were options.
There were options to the Earth Company.
And of course, the Earth Company didn't take this totally well. But eventually, there's a necessary fallout, which makes up the body of the story. I won't go into that here. But when you start telling a story about human civilization, your conflict between freedom and economics and the people who try to control it all It just happens. I mean, it's just part of humanity. And this kind of story will go on being valid so long as there are two-footed individuals of our general description wandering about. It's just what we do. It's forces that are in necessary opposition. And a certain amount of it produces order. A certain amount of too much of it produces tyranny. And when tyranny arises, it has to be dealt with. And I'm very glad that Jane dogged me into actually doing this story. I have to thank Betsy and Daw. We got to go there together, and writing can be a solitary kind of occupation.
And Betsy's been in on the AU stuff since down below station. She was.
But you know, when you write, you've got nobody to cheer at the good bits, nobody to talk through the stuck spots. And then when you've got somebody who you can just toss the file to and say, take it. And then it comes back and something magical has happened and there is an answer and it all works. That's what a good collaboration is like. And I think of it as a gift, a very special gift. And I thank you all very much for the recognition given this particular special book.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot for that backstory, Jane and Carolyn Cherry on the book. We really appreciate it. Carolyn Cherry is my fellow University of Oklahoma alum. It's been a few years since she signed my first edition of Gate of Ivrel at the OU Student Union. Hi, I'm Tom Jackson, a Libertarian Futurist Society board member, and I'm here to introduce Sarah Hoyt, who will present the 2020 Prometheus Hall of Fame Award for Best Classic Fiction. The Hall of Fame Award has gone to a wide range of works, including Hans Christian Andersen's The Emperor's New Clothes, Poul Anderson's Traitor to the Stars, Ray Bradbury's Fahrenheit 451, Anthony Burgess's A Clockwork Orange, Robert Heinlein's A Moon is a Harsh Mistress, J.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings, and last year's winner, Kurt Vonnegut's story Harrison Bergeron. Our presenter is award-winning prolific novelist Sarah Hoyt. Sarah writes science fiction, fantasy, mystery, and historical fiction, and has written more than 30 novels. She won the 2018 Dragon Award for Best Alternate History Novel for Uncharted, co-authored with Kevin J. Anderson. But we like to think she particularly treasures her 2011 Prometheus Award for Best Novel for Darkship Thieves, the first in a series of novels set within our solar system and portraying a libertarian anarchist asteroid society. There are 5 novels in the series, at least so far. So here to present the Hall of Fame Award, would you please welcome our friend, Sarah Hoyt.
Okay, that should be working, right? I do particularly treasure the Prometheus Award because before that, I felt like I was writing in this little dark corner, and suddenly I realized I wasn't alone. So that was an important moment. I think it's important to write about liberty and to recognize books that emphasize and explore the idea of liberty. Because not only doesn't liberty seem to be a natural idea, but it seems to be a relatively recent one. Humans are social apes. We come from creatures who lived in a bin. From studying ancient civilizations and some relatively modern ones, it seems to me that the very idea of liberty The idea of doing something one wished to do outside the norms of the band was alien to most of our ancestors. As alien as the idea of not wielding full power over those under our control still seems to be for most people. And it is a pretty difficult idea to implement. As the parent of grown sons, it is almost overwhelmingly tempting to say, no, don't do that. You can't do that. You're not allowed to do that. I did that. I know how the story ends. But this is their story, not mine. And things have changed, especially since I was born and grew up in another country. Don't adjust your set. This is actually my accent. So it's difficult, but I have learned to step back and allow them their liberty. And what we know is that though the idea of individual liberty is recent, where it is allowed to flourish, it leads to the greatest freedom, prosperity, and paradoxically, security for most individuals. And because perfect liberty doesn't exist anywhere, and the idea of liberty itself doesn't exist anywhere in this world outside the human brain, it's important to dream about it, to define it, to write about it, and most of all, to recognize it, particularly in works that are fun, because most of us don't write to preach. Because we can't create my camera seems to have failed, so I'll continue in voice. Because we can't create what we can't visualize. And creating liberty repays the human race most generously. The Prometheus Award does an exceptional job of recognizing writers who dream liberty into their works. As such, it is my pleasure to introduce the 5 finalists for the 2020 Prometheus Hall of Fame for Best Classic Fiction. Sam Hall, a 1953 short story by Paul Anderson. As Easy as ABC, a 1912 story by Rudyard Kipling. The Trees, a 1978 song by the rock group Rush. A Time of Changes, a 1971 novel by Robert Silverberg, and Leapy Legan, a 1978 story by F. Paul Wilson. And the work inducted into the Prometheus Hall of Fame is Sam Hall. Anderson's daughter, Astrid Anderson Baer, will accept the award for her late father.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Sarah, and thank you to the members of the Libertarian Futurist Society for this honor to my late father, Paul Anderson. Dad deeply valued the awards he received from you all during his lifetime, and I'm sure he would have been pleased to receive this additional honor. Sam Hall has been nominated for the Prometheus Awards Hall of Fame several times previously, and it's a testament to its staying power as a story that it has now won. First published in the August 1953 issue of Astounding Magazine, it's been reprinted many, many times in anthologies as diverse as The Liberated Future, Computer Crimes and Capers, and Terrorists of Tomorrow. Science fiction set in the future is often as much about the time it was written in as it is about prognostications. Diving into both world and family history, we can tease out some of the threads that come together to make this story of the subversion of an authoritarian regime from within its record-keeping arm and how that inspired revolution. In 1953, we were less than 10 years from the end of World War II. Senator Joe McCarthy was busy investigating citizens for wrongful thoughts and potential treason. The early mainframe computer, UNIVAC, correctly predicted the winner of the 1952 presidential election. Dad's brother, my Uncle John, was turned down for the U.S. Foreign Service because of his Danish communist aunt, and Dad wrote Sam Hall. Computer-savvy folk of today will likely snicker a bit at the electromechanical horrors and buzzes of the government's central records computer, nicknamed Matilda the Machine. Matilda holds detailed information on all citizens, tracking all transactions, travel, education, contacts, relationships. The Matildas of today know a tremendous amount about us and our shopping habits, travel plans, and private emails. For although Dad did a good job of thinking about the power of computers held by the government as data gathering machines, in 1953, he didn't seem to have thought much about computers as gatherers of data for private enterprise. The America of Sam Hall has closed its borders to immigration, gives its citizens loyalty ratings, assigns them each a unique ID number, and demands that it is tattooed on the shoulder. There is an underground movement, but as our protagonist Thornburg muses, it was supported by foreign countries who didn't like an American-dominated world, at least not one dominated by today's kind of America, though once USA had meant hope. Thornburg, whose actions in changing Matilda's records start by trying to protect himself and his son from the taint of a treason accusation against a relative, finds that his anger at the political reality he lives in requires him to go further. He starts inserting more false information into the records and creates the digital rebel, Sam Hall. Sam Hall was taken up by the underground as a Scarlet Pimpernel-like character, seen everywhere, doing everything, never being caught. There is growing violence in the streets, then civil war. Thornburg finds himself getting in deeper and deeper, and finally decides to become a wholehearted rebel himself, preparing to die if need be. Ultimately, the underground libertarian army prevails, and Thornburg is asked to work himself out of a job, dismantling Matilda, but saving just a bit of information, strictly practical facts. We are left to wonder how long the new regime stays true to its principles. The power of art is that older works can resonate with current events. Today, we have unrest in the streets. We have federal forces being deployed in cities under questionable authority. We have borders that are narrowing the welcome to immigrants. There are a lot of quotes from the late Congressman John Lewis that are relevant here about finding good trouble, speaking out when you see injustice, having the courage to do what's right. But let me close with this from his last essay in the New York Times. The vote is the most powerful nonviolent change agent you have in a democratic society. You must use it because it is not guaranteed. You can lose it. So please, be a force for change. Vote. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Astrid. We really appreciate you showing up to talk about your father and his work. We all love his stuff. And thank you very much, Sarah. Hi, I'm Tom Jackson. Again, I'm your moderator for the second part of the Prometheus Awards doubleheader for NASFiC, where we have a panel discussion and we explore 40 years of the awards with 2 award-winning writers and with 2 insiders who know all about the awards. Give me just a moment to introduce my panelists, and then we'll go right into it. My writers include F. Paul Wilson, a New Jersey resident, Grandmaster Horror Award winner, and Prometheus Award Lifetime Achievement winner. He has written more than 60 books, including science fiction, horror, adventure, medical thrillers, and young adult books. We gave him Prometheus Awards for Wheels Within Wheels, for Sims, for Healer, and for An Enemy of the State. He has 8 million books in print in the US and is perhaps best known for his Repairman Jack novels, although you may also know New York Times bestsellers such as The Keep, made into a movie in 1983. His novel Signals, part of the Adversary cycle that includes The Keep and The Tomb, came out in July. Other Sandboxes, a collection of pastiches, will come out in October. It includes tributes to H.P. Lovecraft, Mary Shelley, Ray Bradbury, Richard Matheson, Edgar Rice Burroughs, Sax Rohmer, Dashiell Hammett, Arthur Conan Doyle, and others. Our other writer, Sarah Hoyt, a Colorado resident, is an American science fiction, fantasy, mystery, and historical fiction writer. She is a native of Portugal who moved to the United States in the early 1980s and became a U.S. citizen in 1988. She has warned readers that no genre is safe from me, and she's proven it by writing more than 30 novels under a variety of names, including a mystery series written under the name Elise Hyatt, the Furniture Refinishing series. I just think that's the greatest name ever for a genre series. She won the 2011 Prometheus Award for Best Novel for her science fiction novel Dark Ship Thieves, and won the 2018 Dragon Award for Best Alternate History Novel for Uncharted, co-authored with Kevin J. Anderson. Michael Grossberg co-founded the Libertarian Futurist Society to sustain the Prometheus Awards and chairs the Prometheus Awards Best Novel Finalist Judging Committee, which produces an annual slate of finalists for all of our members to vote on. And saying he is the co-founder is kind of the official way of putting it, but really it was Michael who took on the load of perpetuating the Prometheus Award and organizing it. And it was a lot harder to do in the days before the internet. A theater critic and arts reporter since the early 1980s, Michael has contributed to 6 books, including critical essays for the annual Best Plays Theater Yearbook and an essay afterward for the first paperback edition of J. Neil Schumann's Prometheus-winning novel, The Rainbow Cadenza. He has many other publications and has won a stack of journalism awards. William H. Stoddard is the president of the Libertarian Futurist Society, and I can tell you from experience, he is a very diligent president, and he's very patient in dealing with personalities such as me. When we reelect him every year, it's sort of a matter of quick, get him in there again before he can get away. Bill is a copy editor specializing in scientific and scholarly publications. He has written more than 24 GURPS supplements for Steve Jackson Gaines, beginning with GURPS Steampunk in 2000, which won an Origins Award for Best Role-Playing Supplement. Many of his essays and reviews have appeared at our Prometheus blog, which you can find at our website, lfs.org. We want to thank NASFiC for working with us and allowing us to present these programs. And I want to give a shout out to Chris Hibbert, also a member of our board, who is serving as our producer and technical advisor.